Here is my new Vincent SV 700 hybrid integrated amp. This amp is a German engineered and designed and manufactured in China. So of course you get the best combination of the engineering and the cost effectiveness of the Chinese manufacturing. It weighs 53 pounds, so that gives us a pretty good idea of what the quality is, gives us a little idea. And I just got this amp in and I'm very delighted with it. I'm going to give a little description of it here, and then I will do another video where I talk about what it sounds like, what I think about it, and so forth. This amplifier operates in Class A, 50 watts per channel in pure Class A. It also will operate in Class AB. It has a switch down there in Class AB, 100 watts per channel. My speakers are very efficient, and so they would do just fine with 25 watts per channel. And the difference is that the sound improves, I would say, considerably in Class A over Class AB. But this thing will, it gets hot, and it practically will be like a warm house heater, room heater in the winter time. So one of the things I've done is if I'm over by the computer listening on Tidal, I'll probably have it in AB and using less energy, and I use that like a standby. So if I'm messing around, don't want to shut it down, don't want the tubes to cool down, I'll put it in Class AB. Then when I get ready to set in the sweet spot and really listen, I press the button, the bottom left-hand corner button down there, then puts it into Class A, and it really improves the sound. One of the things I like about this, it's a hybrid integrated amp. The tubes are in the preamp section. It uses a dual mono topology design, so that really helps with the sound. And you have 3 tubes in each channel of the preamp section, 2 12AU7s and 1 12AX7. And the good thing there again is that we can change the sound. We can get more variation from different tubes, and people like to do tube rolling and play with the tubes. I don't know what tubes come in this. I'm guessing they're modern, current manufactured, either Chinese tubes or maybe Russian tubes. But I've got on order some high quality matched new old stock tubes, and you can read a lot about those and see which ones you think are going to suit your listening, whether you want more sparkly, you want more warm, you want more holographic, whatever. And so that's one of the fun things that we can do with this. Another part of the engineering is that it uses 0 negative feedback, all transistor output. And the good advantage of that is that maintains whatever the tubes are adding, that maintains that through the power amplification into the output. Where an amp that uses negative feedback or some other methods to achieve the power and the low distortion that they get, is that kind of does away with the tube benefit. You have 3 RCA inputs, 1 balanced input, 1 optical, 1 coax input, has a built-in CD quality DAC. I assume that's what the optical coax inputs are for. I'm not ever going to use that, so I will have no idea what it sounds like. Really, I only need 2. From my DAC, I got a balanced going into the balanced input, and then from the phono RCAs, and so I got more inputs than I'm going to need. It has a dual speaker output, so A and B. You can select either A or B, or you can run them both at the same time. And I think that's an advantage. It has a pre-out, so that's great for going to a subwoofer. It has a record out, and it has trigger connections for you home theater guys that want the on-off triggered by when stuff is turned on. So one of the things about this is it's kind of a vintage look. You can order it either black or silver. We've had black stuff for 30 years or more now. I'm tired of that. I love my vintage Marantz that I had here, and in particular I like the looks of it. So this gives us a little bit of that look. I ordered this in silver. Now you see a round circle light in the front. There's a tube. This happens to be a rectifier tube, so it's probably not that important, and I think it a little bit gimmicky, but I'm happy with it. And one of the things about it, from the remote control, it has a backlight in it, so if you really want to get that tube look, you hit the bright light. We can tone the light down, and we go down to where all you're seeing is just the tube, which is normally the way I run it. A real built like a tank heavy aluminum remote control. You can't turn the power on or off. You can't switch the AAB from the remote control. You can switch from Class A to Class AB while the amp's running. That's no problem. And you have input selectors, and you have the volume up and down, and that works real good. And it also has a mute button, so that's very convenient. We get a phone call or something, we can hit the mute, and before I had to jump up and lift the tone arm up on the turntable or turn the amplifier down. So I'm enjoying having a remote control. One of the things is the volume remote is variable, and you hit the button real quick, it makes a little jump, but you maybe don't get it quite where you want it. So if I got to really fine-tune that power level to where I'm getting just the sound I want from the sweet spot, I may have to get up and make a fine adjustment by hand, because the remote control works great, but it's just a little hard to get the precise level you want. So if you have some interest in this, my next video about this, I'm going to do a little discussion, a little rant, going to talk about cost benefit of better amps and the law of diminishing returns. How much maybe you need to spend or don't need to spend to get an improvement. I'm going to talk about what this amp sounds like compared to my previous amp and other amps I've tried here. And I'm not going to have sound samples. I don't have a really good system for doing a real high quality sound sample, and at any rate, when you listen on your computer system, you're not going to be hearing what I hear. So I may work on that in the future to try to do a setup with my recording system to get some good sound samples of what it sounds like. But so I am tickled to death with this amplifier, and it achieved everything I was hoping for in getting a new amplifier, and so stay tuned for more. A little postscript here that I thought was important to show that's valuable. Notice when you use the remote control to control the volume, it lights up. Not when you do it manually, but that way you're operating the remote control. You can see where the doggone volume is set, and that's really important, and a lot of amps don't have that feature. So just a little addendum here. My new Vincent SV 700 hybrid integrated amp. Before purchasing this, for about a year, I've been doing research. I've been reading. It's hard to go out and listen to equipment. I've listened to a little bit of equipment. Haven't been able to listen to this one. I've listened to solid state equipment, tube equipment. Didn't get a chance to listen to very much hybrid equipment, but I wanted to get the maximum bang for the buck, and One of the things that we worry about is my 1975 Marantz 2275, all redone, modern speaker connectors and so forth. My worry was that I'll spend some money and I won't be able to tell the difference, or even worse, maybe the difference could be less. Okay, I liked my Marantz. I was happy with that. I liked the look of it, and I've tried a number of other amps in here. I had several other amps, and my record store gets used equipment, and he's allowed me to bring several things home. Now, they were all probably in a similar price range to about what the Marantz was worth. There was no real high-end differences there. People say every amp sounds different. I say, no, they don't. They all sound the same. Well, of course, that's not true. But in a certain price range, a certain class, they sound more alike than they sound different. And I tried 3 or 4 different amps in addition to the Marantz in my system here. And with the typical thing, you mess around, you change stuff. Maybe by the time you turn something on and listen to it 15 minutes later, there didn't anything sound enough better or enough worse to even notice. So you end up with features and some things that matter. And so I've been particularly worried about the law of diminishing returns, that you can spend a considerable amount of money and maybe you can't tell the difference. One of the comments I've made before in the audiophile community is if somebody has selling a $8,000 amp, we can be pretty darn sure that amp probably sounds good, all of them, no matter who made them. But there's no information there. That doesn't help us at all. What most of us, especially us ones that are a little more frugal, or conservative about how we spend on this stuff, is what we want to know. We want to hear about the $2,500 amp that 95% of the people couldn't tell the difference between that amp and an $8,000 amp. Well, you're never going to hear that information. The magazines, all the reviewers, their whole business model is based on advertising revenue, and so you listen to them talk about a $200 pair of speakers or a $120,000 pair of speakers, and you read the review, you practically can't tell the difference in what they say. Very frustrating. And then nowadays, it's hard to go out and listen and compare. It's hard to find, if you're in New York or Chicago or San Francisco, you can find a few high-end stores and where maybe they can really give you good demonstration. But even then, they're generally more interested in selling the real high end. So those of us more down towards the low end, it's hard to go any place where we can listen and compare. One of the things I determined here, and this was particular, Paul McGowan, PS Audio, the guy that co-founded that and is one of the owners now, he does YouTube videos about every day, and he's a good guy, and he's a straight talker and a straight shooter. And one of the things that impressed me was their top-of-the-line preamp and power amp, the BHK preamp and power amp. They did research, and he was a solid state guy, and the guy that designed these wanted to use tubes, and so they did a lot of listening. We're going to put in some tubes, and we're going to put in transistors, and we're going to have to hear the difference of the tubes before we use them, because they create a few of their own problems. Well, he said it was no contest whatsoever. When they put a few tubes in the front end, the sound improved. Maybe not drastically, but that's a word I like to use. Okay, the PS Audio, which is good equipment, but that combination of that preamp power amp is about $13,000. And one of the reasons is because it's made in Boulder, Colorado, so it's all U.S. made, and they have good employees there, and they get good benefits and so forth. But when I decided upon this Vincent hybrid integrated amp, I believe I'm getting some of the engineering thought that goes into that PS audio stuff. In other words, I got tube front end here in the preamp, and I got high output power, and Chinese manufacturer. So for basically about a third of the cost. Now, sure, this is probably not quite as good as the PS audio, but could I hear a difference? I doubt it. We're getting up in that kind of realm where, yes, you can spend more money, but can you really hear a difference? And if there is a difference, does it sound better or worse? Just because you spent more money and you hear a difference, it doesn't have to be better. It could almost as easily be worse. So I am tickled to death with this amplifier, and yeah, it cost about 4 times more than what I had in my vintage Marantz, which had been recapped and had the speaker terminals upgraded and a nice wood cabinet. So I worried about spending that money, and can I hear the difference? Well, I could easily hear the difference, and I'm not going to try to use this audio file mumbo jumbo, but I'll use a few words to just try to dramatize the difference. And the big difference is when I listen to the Marantz compared to this amplifier running in Class A, it's like the Marantz, I was listening to a two-dimensional system, and when I got this thing plugged in and turned on in Class A, the three-dimensionality was just drastically increased. And I think drastic is maybe not an overstatement. It didn't take any extended listening or trying this track or that track. Again, you could hear the difference. So what was the improvement? If we say we spend 400% more on an amplifier, well, how much did it improve my system? This is subjective. It's just me. I would say I pretty happily got a 25% improvement. And my concern was, yeah, we spend 400% more on an amp, and maybe there's only a 2% or a 5% improvement in the sound, and maybe with our old ears we couldn't even hear it at all. Well, I could really hear it here. The other thing is, of course, the three-dimensional bubble is just drastically bigger, and one of the things I noticed, I switched to AB on this same amp, that 3D bubble withdraws substantially. It starts sounding more like my Marantz did. So I think the Class A has a big part to do with that, and I looked into that quite a bit. And this, a lot of the amps that do Class A and Class AB, they put out 10 watts in Class A, and then they automatically switch to Class AB. This amp doesn't do it. It puts out 50 watts Class A, and there you are. Okay, what does the tubes add to this? Well, I would say the sound is much more natural, more lifelike, more realistic, and I'll throw another word in there that the tube guys like, sparkly. And some of all of that is diminished when you go to the Class AB. So I've got tubes on order, new old stock matched, real high quality tubes, and I'm anxious to get them in and see what kind of difference I can hear. And my main interest is listening to music, not playing with the equipment. But this does give you the ability to play with the equipment a little bit without buying, selling, trading equipment all of the time. So when we get the tubes, we can get tubes that are the people that know what they're talking about say they're warmer, they're more sparkly, or they're more holographic or whatever. And again, we don't know what that'll sound like when we get here, but I got everything I was looking for in this amp. And one of the comments I was going to make about the law of diminishing returns, if you have $1,000 amp, like let's just say what the Marantz was, I think if you go to a modern, new $2,500 integrated amp, you probably can't hear any difference at all. I don't think you've made enough jump for the technology, for the design, And a lot of these $2,500 integrated amps, you got a phono preamp in there, you got a DAC in there. So a good part of the increase in price is for those aspects of it. And I think I hit the sweet spot with this amp. I got a significant increase in the sound without having to spend a drastically amount more. The other thing I never hear people talk about with tubes about isolation of the amp. Now, generally we isolate everything, but my other amp, I had it on those big sorbethane hemispheres, and I just took it off of it and put it on here. I don't know that that's a possibility, but you got all those tubes in there and sockets, and the vibration maybe could have a little more to do with that. So that's my little rant on trying to improve the sound at a reasonable cost. And the next video I do on this amplifier, I'm going to have the top off. I'm going to have a little picture of that where you can see the tubes in the preamp section. I'm going to have changed the tubes, and I will tell you what kind of difference, what kind of improvement, hopefully, that I've made by using different tubes. So you audiophiles that are interested in this kind of stuff, check in for my next video, and I'll have to get those tubes, get them in, let them run for a few weeks to get burned in a little bit and see how that goes, and then I'll have another video. So back to music listening.